Of the ways we go about resetting your hormones, the first thing we need to get a handle of is insulin. What I'm about to explain about this hormone is possibly the most important nutritional lesson you will ever learn. Now, you heard me describe insulin as the fat storage hormone, but it's so much more than that. Its primary role is that of storing energy, mainly carbohydrates. And the way it plays out is like this. I want you to think of insulin like your FedEx delivery guy. He has a package to deliver. It's glucose. And he has 3 drop-off sites where this package can go. It could go to your muscles, it could go to your liver, or it could go to your fat cells. He shows up with the package of glucose, knocks on the door of each, and muscle opens up its door, takes that package in. Liver opens up its door, takes the package in, and if there's any packages left over, fat will gladly store those. So what happens is your body, you use up that glucose as a source of energy. And what happens is when your glucose levels get low, well, you start tapping into storage. So first, your muscles are going to use up glucose. Your liver is going to use up glucose. And then when there's no more glucose available, it could tap into fat and use the glucose that was stored in fat for energy. But what typically happens is when we feel like we need more energy, we just place another order. And the delivery guy shows up with more packages. So in the real world, the way it plays out is you start feeling your energy levels start to drop, and you take a walk over to the fridge or the pantry, or you pick up the phone and place an order. And you go and fill yourself up with food that you feel is going to provide energy for you. And that's how it pretty much plays out in our bodies. Now, here's the thing. When you become insulin resistant, here's how this scenario plays out. It's going to be playing out very differently. The FedEx guy shows up with the packages, lots of them, and he's knocking on liver's door. Now, the liver is not a big space. So let's, in our mind, pretend that liver can only hold up to 100 of these packages. In our bodies, our liver can only hold on to about 100 grams of glucose. And any packages beyond this get left outside. So next, the guy goes and knocks on muscle's door. Now, muscle has much more space. Muscle can store up to 400 of these packages, or in our bodies, we can store up to 400 grams. See where I'm going with this? But once muscle gets maxed out, there's no more room for the packages. The packages sit where? Outside. Now, the outside represents your bloodstream. And this is really important because if that package is left outside, the elements of it become toxic and eventually pollute the environment. But in this case, the environment is your body. But lucky for us, fat never has to close its doors because his space was outfitted with these really fancy, special elastic walls. And there's no limit to how many packages can be stored in fat. And so whenever those packages are left over, they just deliver them to the fat stores. And so as long as there are constantly this flow of packages coming in, this constant flow of glucose, well, if muscle's maxed out, liver's maxed out, fat is saying, hey, I'm here, just keep giving them to me. So you see where I'm going with this? So when you've heard people say things like carbs make you fat, this is what they're referring to. Now, is it true? Carbohydrates really don't make you fat, but it's the overabundance of glucose that your body can't use that ends up getting stored as fat. And what happens is that glucose, it gets converted into triglycerides, which are stored in fat. So you've probably heard the term triglycerides before when your doctor tests you for your triglycerides. And unfortunately, they usually look to, well, what kind of fats are you consuming, when the real culprit is not the fats that you're consuming, but the carbohydrates that you're consuming. So at first, this is a good thing that your body takes this excess, converts it, and stores it as fat, because this is how your body protects itself from a potentially toxic situation. However, when insulin resistance is at its worst, here's what the scene now looks like. More delivery guys are sent out with more packages and they're banging on muscle and liver's door, but nobody's answering. They've heard the call so many times that they've become deaf to it. And the delivery guy, he notifies his company about what's going on. He says, hey, I'm trying to deliver these things and they're not answering. And the company's solution is, well, just attempt more deliveries until they answer. But they don't answer. I mean, does that really make sense? Like, just keep making more deliveries even though nobody's opening up their door? It doesn't. But yet, this is exactly how our body responds. So our bodies have become resistant, non-responsive to the delivery attempts. So no matter how loud or how often the knocks come at the door, nobody's hearing them. Not only that, we've been bombarded with so many of the packages that our bodies become intolerant of them. And that is how insulin resistance plays out. So this process that we're going to be working through is to help you become insulin sensitive, which means that the doors of liver and muscle are wide open. And this way, when those packages are delivered, they can accept them. And then our bodies will utilize them much more efficiently. And this is what we call becoming fat adapted. And fat adaptation is the ultimate goal of this program that you're in. So what does it mean, though, to be fat adapted? Well, I am glad you asked. It means that you are no longer dependent upon glucose as a primary source of energy, meaning you don't need another shot of sugar or another carbohydrate just to get you going. Now, this doesn't mean that you're not going to consume them. It just means that you are not reliant upon them. And that's really important. It means that you are burning fat for energy most of the time. And listen, this is our native state. This is what we were born to do. This was what we were designed for. During ancestral times, when we were hunters and gatherers, our ability to burn stored fat and produce ketones, you've probably heard of being in ketosis before, maybe. This was the only way we were able to survive. And without this mechanism in place, I mean, we would have not have had the energy to go hunt or gather our food. So imagine this, in the times in which somebody actually had to hunt for their food, they may not see any type of animal for several days, which means that they may not be eating or they're eating in very small amounts. So their body needed a way in order to have energy available for when it was time to hunt, when it was time to turn it on and to be able to move fast and make the kills so that they could bring food home to their family. So how do you know when you finally become fat adapted? Well, again, I am so glad you asked because I have some answers to this question. First, you no longer wake up feeling like the first thing you need to do in the morning is eat. You no longer worry that should you miss a meal, it's going to result in you becoming hangry. I mean, that was one of my big issues for a very long time. Corey Beth used to say, oh, Mike's just hangry. Don't mind him. Or not being able to function optimally until you've filled your belly. So that's where we don't want to be. We don't want to have to be reliant upon food. And when we are fat adapted, we are not. Your energy level, it's going to remain relatively the same throughout the day. And this is awesome. So the reason why our energy levels fluctuate throughout the day is because our glucose fuel tank is constantly doing this, right? And it's a small tank. As I said, we can only store about 500 grams of glucose in the form of glycogen at any one time. So if we are going to be reliant on this fuel source, then we need to constantly be filling the tank. And essentially, our glycogen tanks can only supply us with upwards of 2,000 calories at any one time. But by contrast, our fat tank is huge. Even the leanest individuals can store tens of thousands of calories at one time. When we're using this fuel source, the ups and downs don't result as often. In fact, the ups and downs are non-existent because our body is receiving that steady stream of energy that it needs from itself. So another indicator, you can eat carbs without the crash. How many of you feel like you eat carbohydrates and then an hour, maybe 2 hours later, You're starting to feel yourself getting tired, lethargic. Maybe you're a little cloudy, right? Maybe you feel like you need to eat again. That's an indicator that you are glucose dependent. So when you can eat carbs without the crash, this is a really strong indicator that you have become fat adapted. So your body's becoming more accepting of the carbs you consume. And even if we're talking about sugar or refined carbohydrates, you're not going to experience those major fluctuations because your body knows how to utilize those carbohydrates much more efficiently. Next, you can exercise fasted. I know this is going to sound crazy to some people, but if you're that type that exercises first thing in the morning, you're not going to need to quote unquote fuel up before your exercise. If you exercise late in the morning or later in the day, I mean, you could work out even if it's been several hours since your last meal and feel good. And the advantage of this is your body is better positioned to rely on body fat to supply your energy needs. So in order to crank through the workout, it's not that you got to keep sucking down sugar, sucking down an energy drink. Your body is just like, hey, cool, I got this awesome resource right here. It's called body fat. I'm just going to keep tapping into that and keep supplying you with the energy you need so that you can keep going. Sounds pretty awesome, right? I think so. And this is not to say that exercising fasted is always the ideal thing to do, but if you can do it without a decrement in your performance, then that's solid evidence that you have become fully fat adapted. And the last indicator, maybe most noticeably and of the greatest significance, is that brain fog that we tend to feel at different points in the day. It just vanishes. You see, your brain and heart actually prefer ketones over glucose for the same reason I stated just a moment ago. This fuel source provides stability. It eliminates all the highs and the lows. And in studies with people with Alzheimer's, they found that although the brains were no longer able to utilize glucose for normal brain function, they were able to utilize ketones in abundance. So these are just some of the things that you should be looking for during this journey. When you're starting to notice some of these things taking shape in your body, then you'll know that you are becoming fat adapted.